embodied AI and robotics is about to go through that inflection point that we've seen in internet, text, and video. The age of autonomy is on its way.
This AI series has been incredible, and we still have 2 episodes left. Alex Kendall is the CEO and founder of Wayve, an autonomous driving systems company who are making incredible progress in this space. Alex candidly shares his journey from a childhood love of building machines and a passion for exploration and travel, which ultimately led him to Cambridge University and then to founding a company at the forefront of the self-driving car technology revolution. In February 2022, Wayve developed a driving model that can adapt to different cities, different towns, different vehicle types, pushing the boundaries of AI technology. This achievement was accompanied by a $200 million funding round, a new office in California, and a collaboration with none other than Microsoft to scale deep learning for autonomous vehicles. Recently, they made headlines when Alex actually took Bill Gates for a spin around London in one of their driverless vehicles. We unpack this whole crazy journey and talk about the future of autonomous driving systems at large. Alex is also an AI enthusiast and shared his thoughts on recent innovations and gives Kerensa and I his crystal ball view of the coming years, what he's excited about, and much, much more. This was an absolute treat for Kerensa and I, and I'm sure it will be for you. This is Alex Kendall. Alex, thank you so much for coming on. We've been really excited about this, Kerensa and I. There's so much to unpack, so much to talk about. But let's start with a big question that we always start with. What are you most excited about in relation to the evolution of AI technology?
Gosh, that's a big question to start with. But I think in the last 6 months has been just transformational for AI, and it's even surprised me as someone who's been working in this space for over a decade. But look, I think the trend that's been most interesting to me has been one that it hasn't always been the algorithmic breakthroughs that have led to these big breakaway moments and breakaway models, but it's actually been the curation of large data sets and compute that's unlocked these big moments. And I think as we've gone through seeing various forms of AI develop, to give you an example, like the image recognition technology we saw in the 2010s, they were built on convolutional neural networks that were developed in 1989 or around that time. And so it was the data and ImageNet and other image recognition data sets that really let us unlock this technology. And I think we're seeing a similar thing with the compute and language data that's powering these large language models that are coming to light right now. And so to build on it, the new trend that I'm excited about now, though, is this movement from AI being a task-specific application that, for example, if you want to build a system that can, detect different types of flowers and images, you'll get a very large data set of flowers and images and learn to solve that problem, to one where we're now seeing this task-agnostic ability of these foundational AI models. And I think what this is allowing us to do is to just expand the amount of data and compute that we can access to tie different tasks together to create these more general purpose learning machines. And I think that's the trend that I'm really excited about seeing today.
Is there a particular app or piece of tech that you've been particularly excited about and using yourself, that you've been playing with? Because I imagine that, like many of us, you like a good play and you like experimenting.
I think demos are the way to really connect this technology with the world. I remember during my PhD, I was fortunate enough to be part of the team who developed one of the first image segmentation methods using deep learning. And we created a web demo that allowed anyone to upload an image and it would segment out the different objects in that image. And, we had all these tabloid newspapers trying it out and uploading these weird and wacky images. And it really did capture people's imaginations. And so I think demos are really powerful. But the one that I think first jumped out to me most recently was these image generation models, Stable Diffusion, to name an example. And I think what was truly exciting for me there was seeing these images could bring together multiple concepts that you've never seen together before. An example like a dog sitting in a house made of sushi. Each of these concepts on their own make sense, but when you bring them together, it's completely unrelated, and they bring together something that makes sense. And I think that was really exciting to me from an AI perspective.
That was a great example off the cuff, by the way. I commend you for that. I have to say, Kerensa, have you used Stable Diffusion at all?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? My daughter, the 8-year-old daughter, absolutely loves it. We just come up with funny images and it just creates them. It's
Yeah, with the
brilliant. But
power
yeah.
of the creator. I mean, I remember years ago when UGC began to take off, and obviously the social media networks have enabled just the ordinary man on the street to be able to create and publish. And what the new technologies are doing is really democratizing the power to unleash your imagination and do amazing things. I mean, obviously you have to think very carefully about all the ethics around that, but it's an incredibly exciting moment in time.
Yeah, and I have to say on Stable Diffusion as well. I don't know if you've come across Emad or any of the content he's created. He is so impressive in terms of the way he talks about AI, and he's a real thought leader and a name to watch in the future. I think he's really going to drive this space in terms of general AI, not just image creation or whatever.
Was that a deliberate joke? Drive. Nice segue, Gareth.
Yeah, I didn't intend that. So, look, I want to go back to the beginning, Alex. Could you just give us a little bit of a potted history of Alex Kendall from growing up in New Zealand right through to to today, and that bit in between? What set you on the path that you ultimately ended up following?
I was fortunate enough to grow up in the South Island of New Zealand, in a city called Christchurch. It's on the doorstep of the most beautiful mountain ranges and beaches, and had an amazing childhood exploring the outdoors there, taking part in a lot of sport and of course building and creating things. And that led me to an engineering degree before being fortunate enough to win a scholarship that sent me over to Cambridge University. When I left New Zealand and arrived at Cambridge, it was the first time I'd been to Europe, and it was, that was, I think, the first time I started to really spend a lot of time thinking about AI.
When you were little, Alex, did you used to tinker with technology, or did you have computers, and did you used to do programming even when you were quite a little boy?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to. I mean, my dad was an engineer, and he was the best mentor for me growing up. But I did have that quintessential experience of building tree huts and playing with Lego, and even some more complex things like building a solar water system for our house, or creating video games and these kind of things. Ironically, despite my dad being an engineer, we often had quite dated technology. Like we were, I think it was not until late high school that we got broadband, but I was stuck with dial-up and an old Windows 95 computer, having to learn how to program and learning a lot of tricks to get around some of the limitations of the hardware at that time. But my first foray into programming was when I was a kid, programming in video games and other applications, and they were just the best hive for learning how to solve problems and to challenge my mind.
Do you remember the first time you ever experienced an AI of any type?
Well, I remember programming game AIs. I used to make these video games where my pets were the main characters, and I used to make game AIs that used to control and move them around. But it was a very rules-based system, very rudimentary. I remember predictive text was another early memory I have on the old Nokia cell phones we had that allowed you to not have to type out full sentences and these kind of systems. But I think they were my earliest memories of intelligent software and machines.
I've never thought of predictive text as being AI, but I suppose it is, isn't it? And that was like last year's old, isn't it? That's quite a primitive form, albeit, but you know what I mean. I suppose it is artificial intelligence, surely.
The first one I particularly remember as a tool that I played with was TinEye, and I'm guessing it must have been around 2007, 2008 when I first played with that, and I just found it amazing. You can put any type of image, and you can find all instances of it across the internet, and I found that quite mind-blowing in its time. I imagine I was quite a late adopter in comparison to someone like Alex.
Well, going back to text prediction, I mean, GPT-3 and 4, I mean, at the end of the day, these are text prediction systems, just a world apart from old Nokia cell phone text prediction.
Tell us about what you learned from that experience at Cambridge that you've taken into your career. Do you know what I mean? What lessons did you learn that you took forward into your career in the private sector?
Cambridge was a wonderful adventure, and one of the things that perhaps I expected going into it would be that it would be a space of perhaps just academic excellence where you shut yourself in a room and really think about amazing ideas and come up with research. But actually, what I found was it was more of a platform to connect with amazing people and work on problems that have a global impact. So for me, the experience ended up being a lot about developing relationships, collaboration, being able to challenge and be challenged with peers around you. And, for example, having the platform to share research at conferences around the world, you're challenged by that, having to create narratives behind it, as well as a lot of the amazing thing about the collegiate system at Cambridge is that you're living, eating, and surrounded in a college with many other different disciplines outside of, say, engineering and artificial intelligence that my PhD research was in. So ultimately, for me, it all came down to the people.
That's a lovely thing to say, Alex. It's really nice. And I'm sure all the people that were your friends and colleagues through that time, when they hear this, they'll feel just quite gratified. It's just such a lovely thing to say. And I'm sure they feel the same as well. I mean, going through that experience together and having the opportunity to learn from one another and have those kind of probably lifelong connections. Hopefully some of them will be still, watching your journey from afar, and some will be actually, still very close to you now.
I hope so. I mean, I'm still fairly close, lifelong friends that I did make there. But also in my academic lab, I think there's no two PhDs are the same. They're all very different. And I was fortunate enough to have to be working with a professor, Roberto Cipolla, who was so supportive and engaged in entrepreneurship, but also provided the platform and freedom to really explore some quite contrarian and bold ideas, and that sort of environment of 3 years of my life to really sit back and think about, okay, just follow my nose of curiosity, think about what is the most biggest and important thing that I could work on, and then to go and really have the complete focus to go and tackle that. That's what I loved about that time.
And do you think there's a specific thread in your kind of the entrepreneurship and the innovation that was sparking in you at that point in time that you've been able to carry through now in your journey as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, and as an innovator?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you think about a lot of the research we were doing, I was always excited about how can we build real life demos and bring things into the physical world and show people and demonstrate impact. I mentioned before the image segmentation demo that we put together for Segnet as one example, but there were many others about building a localization demo that let you use your phone to take a photo and it would show you where you are in the city from that photo. Well, these kind of things that really brought to life a lot of the research. A lot of my research was motivated by real world impact, and surrounding that, I had colleagues and other folk at Cambridge that were taking the path of entrepreneurship, had raised venture capital, built early stage businesses, and built proof of concepts, and in some cases products that there were footsteps that I could follow in and be inspired by, and I feel really fortunate enough to have that ecosystem surrounding me.
So could you tell us, Alex, about autonomous driving systems? How did that come about for you? Talk us through the embryonic stage of Wayve. How did it start for you? Where did it come from? And what was that early period of the company's history? Can you talk us through that initial phase of getting it up and running?
There's probably one more piece to put in the puzzle, which is that as I was, my PhD was all about building, and my research was all about building intelligent machines that could see and make their own decisions. So being able to build computer vision technology that could understand what's around it, where it is, what's going to happen next, and all of these kind of questions from cameras.
Because you had worked on drones as well around that period, hadn't you?
Yeah, that's right. I got the chance to do some work on drones, on augmented reality, on business intelligence and analytics from camera signals, and there's many different applications of this technology. I think, and maybe this goes back to my interest in building physical machines growing up, but I'm fascinated about complex systems, and I think there's nothing more complex than AI, but I'm also fascinated with exploring and moving throughout the world, and I think the confluence of these ideas leads you to embodied intelligence and robotics. So that's what I've been pursuing my entire career. I had the chance in the middle of my PhD to go to Silicon Valley for a year and spend the time with Skydio, at the time, an early stage drone company. And I think there were a couple of things that were really amazing about that experience. Firstly, it still always comes down to this theme of people and some of the amazing leaders I got to work with there. Adam, Abe, and Hike. It was incredible to work with folks like them and see what it's like to go through a startup journey and learn what great looks like. But more specifically, in that year, we were working on a drone that could essentially autonomously fly and follow you down a mountain, dodge trees, and film scenes and really bring to life the world around you. So the great thing I got to do there is help bring some of my research onto the drone and enable it to actually fly and follow people and film them autonomously. So that was an amazing experience that opened my horizons to startups, to commercializing technology, and to what teamwork at a greater scale than academia looks like. When I came back to Cambridge, finished my thesis, the reason why I wanted to apply some of these ideas in autonomous driving was, I think, more driven by the scale of impact that space can have. And I think for me, autonomous driving is going to be the first time we see AI systems embodied in the physical world, operating in an open environment. It's going to completely change the way we move, both people and goods in cities. And if you think about the impact of the accessibility of vehicles, what transportation does to our lives in terms of allowing us to connect with family and friends, to be able to receive and move goods, the level of scale of impact, if you put it in monetary terms, it's estimated to be of the order of $6 or $7 trillion in terms of urban mobility globally as a market size. I think that level of impact for me is what drew me to that problem space.
Wow. Okay. Can you just unpack autonomous driving? What exactly do you mean by that?
Autonomous driving is, I guess, the definition I'd make towards that, and I guess it's important to draw a distinction between driver assistance technologies, where you have a user in the vehicle who is legally responsible for that vehicle, but you have technology that assists them how to drive, whether it's highway assistance or automated parking or technology like this. And autonomous driving, I would define that as it's when you have vehicles that can move around without a liable operator in the vehicle itself. Now, there may be some remote monitoring or some other forms of fleet monitoring around the vehicle, but the vehicle itself is driving without any liable humans in it. I think that's the best definition. The other thing, the important thing to consider, though, is the operating domain of that vehicle. Where can it drive? How can it drive? What can it do? And so when you start to think about defining autonomous vehicle applications, it's about, is that vehicle actually fully autonomous, and where and how can it operate?
Yeah, I asked you that for, obviously, I think there's a bit of confusion around that, isn't there? And so just as a bolt-on question, Alex, where do we stand legally right now then? Because I understand that if I was driving an autonomous car, I can't just go and have a sleep in the back and it takes me to my destination. I have to be there by the wheel just in case type thing. Can you maybe give us a bit of context around where we are legally with this technology right now?
Yeah, of course. Autonomous driving is actually here today in a certain sense of the word. For example, if you go to cities like San Francisco or Phoenix in Arizona in the United States, or some other areas throughout the world, you can actually download an app, call a robotaxi, and it'll pick you up with no one in the driver's seat. So the service is here today.
Really? Like right now?
Yeah, you can fall asleep, Gareth, if you want. You can.
That's my dream. No, I didn't know. I didn't know that was like live and happening now. I thought we were a bit away from that, but
no, it's here in some parts of the world. What I would describe around those is that early trials where they're quite restricted in terms of their what you call operational design domain, their ODD. They're, for example, predominantly at nighttime where there's less traffic, or they're in very constrained, more simplistic parts of the city. They're expanding over time, but what it's important to describe is, what is the difference between these constrained deployments and what does it take to have autonomy, for everyone everywhere? I think that's the gap that we see, and that's largely a technology gap. But on the regulation side, which is the question you asked, we see regulation in place that can allow that technology to operate in places like the US. The UK has some catching up to do where we're headquartered, and we're working with government right now on putting in place the legislation to enable that. But there are examples of this that is where it is here today.
If an autonomous car were to park illegally, does the autonomous car effectively have personhood, and or can it be prosecuted?
Hey, so that's one of the interesting questions that we have to work through for autonomous vehicles, and I guess for AI more generally. But legislation and then sort of commercial contracts should define how that liability works. But for the first instance, we're certainly looking to build autonomous vehicles that coexist with society today, and will match the road rules and culture that we expect today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because you've also done some incredible things with the Ocado group. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. To talk about what we've done at Wayve so far so we've spent the last 5.5 years developing what we think of as a next generation approach to autonomy. So it's a real AI first approach that builds one single giant end-to-end neural network that's capable of doing something similar to what I described in my PhD, understanding the world around it and making its own decisions on a vehicle and understanding the complexity of the environment it can drive in. That's really powerful because it means that you can build the onboard intelligence to operate with a leaner vehicle set of vehicle hardware. It's more accessible and integratable into different kinds of vehicles, and it can scale to environments that haven't necessarily been charged and ensured that they're issue free. So it's much more adaptable and scalable system. If you contrast that to basically where the industry is at today, the industry's built on top of robotics technology that is, in some cases, over a decade old today. It's a very hand-coded approach where you break down to the problem into different parts like traffic light detection, lane detection, mapping, motion prediction, and build components for each of these. Now, each component of that stack will likely use an AI system today, but the way it's put together is all engineered and hand architected. On top of that, these vehicles are told how to drive through a high definition map, a map that describes the geometry and the layout of road scenes and essentially creates a path for that vehicle to follow and tells it how it should drive. Now, the great thing about that technology is it's proven that self-driving can work. With extraordinary amounts of time and cost in the orders of billions of dollars and many years, it's been able to deploy in some of these scenarios in these domains like San Francisco and Arizona, but at an extraordinary cost. The vehicles have 30 cameras, over 5 radars, 5 LiDARs. They've got a lot of sensor equipment on them, as well as a ton of compute that makes them costly to run, but also operate in terms of building and maintaining that high definition map. With our approach, what we've been able to do is pull away all that infrastructure and create a system that focuses on making the vehicle more intelligent. With the onboard intelligence, it doesn't need a high definition map to tell it how to drive, but a system that can drive based on what it sees. And so in the last 5.5 years, we've been prototyping that system. To go back to the question of our trials with partners like Ocado Group and Asda, so these are two of the largest grocery businesses here in the UK, we've been able to deploy our technology in grocery pilots. For example, with our partner Asda, we are now delivering groceries in a trial in parts of London.
Really?
We are.
Okay.
And the beauty of this is because this technology doesn't pre-map and set how the vehicle should drive, we've been able to drop it into their existing operations and drive on any route within that facility's catchment area to deliver groceries to customers, even if we haven't done that specific route before. So what that means is that our trial today accesses over 170,000 customers in northwest London.
Wow. So how is the training data working for that? Can you tell us just a little bit? I mean, I know you probably don't want to completely pop up the hood if you forgive the phrase, but tell us a little bit about how you're pulling in the different data sources and making that work.
So we train our driving AI using it's very similar to how ChatGPT works today. So ChatGPT is trained with a foundation model on all kinds of internet text, and it's trained to in a self-supervised manner in text prediction. In a similar way, we train our driving AI on enormous amounts of video to do video prediction, to be able to predict the future and predict motion plans and how it should be driving throughout the world. Then there's this process of feedback and alignment that takes that foundation model, in ChatGPT's case, a AI model that is perhaps full of profanity, it's full of statements that are harmful or misaligned with society, and it's aligned to something that can be trusted. In a similar way, we take this foundation model and align it with the behaviors that our fleet partners want. So whether that's a grocery company in the UK, a ride-hailing company in the US, or a public transport fleet in Europe, we want to be able to see all of this data used to align our driving AI to be trusted in that jurisdiction, whether it's to adapt to different driving cultures, like driving on the left or the right-hand side of the road, or dealing with different behaviors like the four-way stop signs that you see in the US, or the drivers that you might see down in Naples in Italy. We want to be able to align with the local driving culture and ensure that the system is trusted and safe. We do that through this process we call fleet learning, which is adapting the driving AI to fleet data.
That's really interesting. And you touched on the fact that you're using supervised models. Do you mind, just for our listeners who might not be so familiar with all of this, talk a little bit about supervised and a little bit about adversarial networks, just so people understand a bit more about what that means?
So we largely train our system using self-supervision. This is a synonym of unsupervised learning. So it's actually not supervised. Supervised learning is where you specifically tell, or you give a labeled example for the AI to predict. So if you have a image of a traffic light, you might label and say it's a red light or it's a green light, and you tell the AI to predict that label. Whereas an example of unsupervised learning is when you take a video and you watch the first couple of frames of that video and you train it to predict the next couple of frames. There's no human labeling there. It's learning from inherent structure in the data. The advantages of that is it's much more scalable because you don't need to use expensive and onerous labeling tasks on the data. It also lets you see much more diverse data because you can look at the inherent structure in it rather than having to get clean structured data sets. And so that's largely how we train our system. But go back to my very original comment around, the beauty right now is we're seeing AI become much more multimodal, moving from a task-specific paradigm to one that's task-agnostic. We see that our driving AI will be trained on not just the driving data that I spoke of, but also simulation data that we generate from our simulation, or internet text, video, audio, all kinds of different data sources. And I think this is the beauty of these general-purpose foundation models we're seeing in AI this year, is that we've seen this advance from image recognition to text prediction to now image generation, video generation, and robotics and embodied intelligence is the next one to come. And so we're looking to really build that general purpose robotics transformer, that really large scale AI system that can adapt to new environments, but learn from all kinds of data sources to ultimately build the most intelligent and safe autonomous driving vehicle.
Just to get the crystal ball out for a minute, Alex, how far away are we from having a situation whereby autonomous driving systems, autonomous vehicles surpass human drivers on roads in the UK, roughly?
So there's a couple of ways to look at this kind of question. The first one I'd say is that caveat I'd say is that the autonomous driving industry has suffered from overhype and predictions that inherently the problem continues to be harder than we thought as an industry. And so I don't want to put out, and Wayve, we don't put out specific dates at Wayve because we want to avoid that hype until we build the confidence internally around seeing this. So it's going to be here next year that you see many folks in the industry saying. I think that's misleading, because you've also got to be very careful about how you define it's here. So you made a definition of surpassing human drivers in the UK.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I'm not talking about driver assistance or partial driving automation. I'm talking about fully driving automation. You know what I mean? Full automation. The sleeping in the back scenario. Okay, how far away are we from that? From that passing the amount of people on the roads? You think 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What do you think?
So if you took the approaches that are on the roads today at a superhuman level of safety in some of the US cities I spoke of, if you took them and brought them to the UK, with billions of dollars in a couple of years, you could replicate them here at extraordinary cost. I think it'd be challenging to create a business case for that, but you could do it. I think where they would fall down is with some of the weather patterns, the rain, the fog, the snow that we see, as well as the complexity, for example, in London with roundabouts and merging traffic. And, you don't have grid-like streets that have wide lanes with clear markings. It's dynamic and chaotic. So I stand by that. I think a different approach is needed to bring this technology to a city like London. And we certainly think that if we can get our technology to work in London, we should be able to bring it anywhere to the world, even a place like for example, Mumbai. So it's not going to be here tomorrow or next year is what I'm trying to say. Having said that, the rate of progress we're seeing in AI and the rate of development that our team has been able to push, we're seeing traction in building this technology and even starting commercial trials. That it's not something that I think you're going to have to wait 10 years to experience. So I'm going to leave it with those upper and lower bounds, but I won't throw out an uncertain date.
I sense a career in politics after this, Kerensa. I don't know what you think.
I think so too.
But it's a very sensible answer, by the
way. I do want to, though, go back to something else you said, Alex, which I was very struck with. In addition to what you said about the people that you collaborated with at Cambridge, you talked a lot about the potential to solve some of the world's biggest problems and the social impact you could deliver. So just whizzing that right up to the future and taking, where you are right now and where you want to, sort of building on Gareth's point, where you want to take the future. What are the kind of big problems that you'd love to be able to solve using some of the technologies that you've built?
Oh, look, let me start with autonomous driving. I think if you think about the opportunity autonomous driving presents, a lot of people talk about on the safety side, and I think that's a really key part of it, being able to address the 4,000 deaths a day we see on the roads from vehicle accidents. I think there's a bit of nuance there, though, because the vast majority of those deaths do come from developing countries. And actually, you see that modern automotive technology can mitigate a lot of them, but we still see a large number of road deaths and life-changing accidents, even on UK roads. So regardless, there is a definite safety problem to be addressed. And look at the airline industry as an example that in 2019 had a year of no deaths in commercial aviation. And so I think that's something that we can and should push for as a mobility sector. But I also think it's interesting to think about the second order effects of autonomy, because in addition to safety, you've got a bunch of other really positive side effects. For example, it's estimated that road accidents and congestion cost the UK and US economies 2% of their GDP. And I think through more efficient transportation, we can really unlock that level of growth, which is substantial. There's other ones that might not be immediately obvious, like we can turn car parks into green parks, up to, in some cities, 10% of their real estate is used for car parking. This is space that should be able to be opened up into green parks, into better utilization. I have a friend who works in urban planning that they ran an experiment where they removed the parking outside shop fronts and saw that through increased foot traffic, through increased engagement between the street and shops, these shops saw a 20% increased turnover without the car parks in front of them. So we can create healthier streets, or even if you think about the level of resource or cost that we invest in our road policing, with autonomous vehicles that are much more adherent to road rules, we can redeploy that in other areas of the justice and policing systems. So I think there's a bunch of really positive benefits to society that autonomous vehicles will bring.
One of my favorite things that I unearthed when we were doing research on yourself and Wayve is that you described Wayve a couple of years ago as a contrarian startup. So I was just wanted to ask you to elaborate on what you meant by that, and also just maybe give us a little bit of an overview of how you would describe the culture that you have built there.
Well, if you cast your mind back to 2017 when I co-founded the business, that was the time when many big technology giants in America were making billion-dollar investments in autonomous driving, and they all said that AVs will be here a year away. And it was at that time where a couple of PhD students at Cambridge decided to take them on, raise a couple of $1 million of seed funding, and go say, we're going to take on this space with a different approach. So you can probably understand why at the time we were laughed at by the industry. People made comments like, you're crazy, it's impossible, and certainly it wasn't obvious that AI systems would be able to scale. I think over the last 5 years, what's played out is that actually, while through sheer capital and brute force, these classical approaches to autonomy have been able to work in limited areas, while we've seen a real challenge from a cost and from a complexity perspective to scale them beyond that. Yet on the other side, what we've been able to do at Wayve is actually deploy end-to-end deep learning technology, AI technology, on public roads, in commercial trials, across over 10 cities in the UK, to do autonomous driving and show that this system can work at a proof of concept level. Meanwhile, we've seen AI scale like a rocket ship, being able to capture the imaginations of the world. And I think we're starting to see the narrative shift where actually, I think the AI breakthroughs that we're seeing in the recent 6 or 12 months are the unlock that will make autonomous driving possible. And we're right at the forefront.
Wow. Well, where is the UK, by the way, in the global pecking order in terms of innovation and maybe regulation as well, in terms of the whole thing? You said it was probably a little bit behind the US. Where are we talking in the global stage?
So AI was invented in the UK. Came out of some work from Alan Turing, and I think that speaks to the real strength the UK has in academic research in AI. If you think about the universities and the industrial research labs we have here, generate so many of the big breakthroughs that lead to these breakaway models. I also think that there's been a growing startup and early venture capital ecosystem in the UK that I feel fortunate to be part of, and has been able to finance companies like ours that are going after these big moonshots. It's not yet at where Silicon Valley is, but it's certainly it's certainly an ecosystem that can facilitate this kind of growth. I think what we're yet to see in the UK is really a plethora of businesses that have gone from proof of concept or early product into worldwide impact. There's a lot of, when companies go from startup to scale up, a lot of acquisition by US big tech. There's a lot of ones that fail to get that funding because that growth stage capital isn't quite there yet. But I think we're starting to see that to change, and I'd love for Wayve to be an example that can really help UK and the European ecosystem get through that next stage of growth and hit that level of escape velocity we need to bring this level of impact to the world.
So, what was the biggest engineering challenge, Alex, in terms of on this journey you've been on? I'm sure you had a few. Which one stands out for you as a pivotal challenge that you overcome in order to to get this technology working in the way that you wanted it to work?
Yeah, look, we started the company in a house office in a residential house in Cambridge where we were living and sleeping and eating together in this house, where the small bedroom was a server room, the main living room was our office space, our boardroom was the middle bedroom, and we had a car in the garage that we were hacking together. We had to do everything ourselves, and to getting off the ground was a real challenge where there was no precedent for what we'd done. Once we got it to drive around the block, though, we started to get some traction, and people started to get interested in our approach and actually help support us. Whether it was businesses like Admiral, the insurer who helped back our trials from the very beginning, or Microsoft, who's helped provide us with the compute that we need to train our models. I mean, the support of partners like these has been really important. But the biggest engineering challenge for me, and maybe this is surprising, is that to build an AI company, 99% of the problem is in data and compute. It's, I said before that the algorithmic breakthroughs for AI breakthroughs typically come 10 to 20 years before the actual breakthrough itself. The underpinnings of ChatGPT and these language models and transformers and contrastive learning and PPO, or a form of reinforcement learning that allows you to give feedback, have actually been around for many years before the breakthroughs today. Or similarly for us, the basis of what we're doing, it's very similar technologies, but it's the access to data that's the real challenge. And autonomous driving, you can't just sit there in your big tech office and get it off the internet. You actually have to build fleet partnerships, deployments. For us, we've got our data collection devices on our partner fleets like DPD, Ocado Group, and Asda to be able to get training data to support our AI. And so getting this data, cleaning it, making it accessible and to be able to train, that's the real challenge. For the models we train, they're based on video primarily. And the level of compute you need to train on video is extraordinarily greater than say the text tokens you train large language models on. Instead of kilobytes of text that's needed for each learning cycle, you need to train on gigabytes of video. And this is where the challenge lies. So for me, the most exciting thing, and the thing that gets us to scale, is that engineering platform of data.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, let's shift gears maybe then. I want to move the attention towards artificial intelligence at large on a macro level. One of the main concerns about AI that people generally are talking about at the moment is that it's going to replace jobs. It's going to have an enormous impact on the labor market. Have you got an opinion on this, on how this is going to play out, how this is going to evolve over the next, say, 5-10 years?
Look, I think the opportunity from artificial intelligence technology is so enormous that we have an imperative as society to go after it in a responsible way. But I think it's important to understand the level of disruption that it will bring, and we should be eyes wide open about that. From a macro perspective, I think the things that are interesting to me about this disruption is that I think it'll occur over a matter of perhaps 30 years in terms of seeing AI become so pervasive in so many different job sectors. And the challenge that presents is, if you compare it to, say, a similar level of disruption we might have seen in the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, that happened over 80 to 90 years, right? And the key difference there is that 30 years is within one person's career. It's within one generation. 80 to 90 years is over a few generations and allows space for society to retool, reskill. The challenge that I think AI presents is that we're going to see disruption within, perhaps severe disruption within one generation. And that presents a challenge during this evolution, where we're going to need to support the world to be able to shift to adopt this technology to make sure that it benefits the masses and has equitable access. I think that's the real challenge, and I guess bring that back to how that affects Wayve or us. Being transparent and advocates around this, I think, is important. But ultimately, working with and partnering with government to help support this transition, I think that's something that, as an ecosystem, we need to be really careful about.
And what are the kinds of skills that you think people will need to be developing to make the most of the opportunities that AI will unleash?
If you think about the strengths that AI brings, I mean, ultimately it is a far more powerful and advanced tool than we've ever seen before. And so if you think about, I mean, tools are what set humanity apart from others and other species in the animal kingdom, right? They're part of what makes us human. And AI is a rocket ship version of what, say, calculators are to accountants or X-ray machines to doctors. You could list many other examples of tools. And AI is going to be a similar accelerant, right? So it's going to give us much more agency as a society. It's going to let us achieve a lot more if we build it in the right way. And I think that's the vision that we need to see with this technology. What is AI good at? Well, AI is fantastic at making clear data-driven decisions. It's fantastic at indexing and searching and presenting knowledge. So I think that's where it really shines, as well as areas where there are significant safety concerns. I think that's where you need automation.
And at school, what are the kinds of things that you think children should be learning in order to make the most of it?
Yeah, look, I think it's really important to be curious about this technology, to be early adopters of it, whether that's just playing with it, understanding it. Some of the demos we've spoken about, whether it's Stable Diffusion or ChatGPT, I mean, they're fairly accessible, free to access if you have an internet connection and a browser. And so being curious, playing around with it, I think is really important. But then also challenging yourself around where can you benefit from it. I think these can be extraordinary tools to improve. If I was at school, I'd love to have these tools to help write some of my essays and elevate my thinking to higher level structuring and narrative and strategy, and avoid some of the lower level tasks when it comes to actually putting pen to paper. And so I guess all I can say is be curious, be an early adopter, and challenge yourself where you might be able to benefit from these tools, because I think they'll provide a competitive advantage.
Yeah,
it's a great tagline, isn't it?
Yeah, the calculator analogy, I think, is one I've basically heard a lot about this subject, isn't it? I think some people are very conflicted on this. I know, because I've spoken to a lot of Kerensa, and I have brought this exact topic up with a number of guests, and whether, the child handing in the essay, if they have used ChatGPT to write that essay, does it matter? Should we be concerned? Should we be more like valuing the fact that they've interacted with the technology to create a great outcome? So in terms of ethics, then, let's just maybe quickly cover that. What ethical considerations, in terms of the widespread adoption of AI technology, what ethical considerations do you think this is going to throw up?
I think the important things for the ethics of AI revolve around the use case that you're trying to apply it for. So automation is really important in safety critical applications, or in situations where there's a very clear and data-driven decision being able to make. I think the corollary to that is that humans and human capabilities can really thrive where there's a subjective decision to be made, where it's driven on human nature, human relationships, or where we want to take and have agency for a decision that's made on top of tooling or analysis and enabled by AI. And so I think we should be clear on two things then. One is the expectations, and two is the boundaries of an AI system. If we're clear on the expectations, it means that we won't overly rely on it or expect to do something that it's simply not capable of. And that comes with really being able to validate the capabilities and transparently understanding what it can and can't do. And then on the boundaries, understanding, being clear on where that limit lies, and making sure that that's respected and we still have agency on to action or to leverage the output of that AI system.
I think it also comes back to something you said before, Alex, around like the quality and the volume of the data, because it's so important. I mean, people often talk about garbage in, garbage out. You have to be so scrupulous to make sure that biases aren't creeping in, and that all of the data sources are as kind of pure and ethically sourced as possible, to make sure that whatever comes out the other side, and however that is then used by the algorithm, it's as ethically sound as possible and is then applied in a very responsible way.
I agree. And I think it's also important to consider the application of the AI itself, because the risk profile and the value profiles are very different if you have a search engine, for example, or a accountant or an AI doctor or an AI driver. The value that it's providing is very different in each of those, but also the risk. And so having regulation or ethical values that you apply broadly to all AI is, they're perhaps as a base level like we have in human society, a base level of ethics and morals that we should expect from one another. But more specifically, when it comes to the application, you really need to consider things on an application by application basis, because the way that we think about validation and the risk in, say, the medical space is different from some of the others we cited. We might even see in the medical space that if an AI system can give a better insight than a medical professional, then we may even see, say, insurers mandate that in order to facilitate the insurance claim, that a decision needs to be made or checked by an AI system. And so I think where these systems can actually improve the ability of society, we do have an imperative to adopt them.
So, Alex, I started the interview by asking you about what excites you most about the evolution of AI technology. So I just wanted to flip that and focus on what you were most fearful about in relation to AI technology innovation.
I feel concerned about what it's going to take to deploy AI systems at scale in the right regulatory environment to achieve this kind of future that we've been describing. It's a really complex challenge with so many different stakeholders. And so to create the environment that facilitates innovation, that allows us to move fast, allows us to iterate and improve, while also being responsible, making sure that we can have provable levels of acceptable safety and really build trust in these deployments. When you then layer on that these things are so different in each application, like we discussed, whether it's a medical, whether it's an application, whether it's a search engine, or whether it's a social media or a self-driving car, that's a really complex set of challenges for regulators. And I think that's going to be a significant hurdle for us to jump through to get this technology to the level of impact we need.
Yeah, I think keeping up with the innovation, I think is absolutely right. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. What advice do you give to people who are fearful about the evolution of AI and think we are heading towards this Terminator 2 Skynet situation? What advice do you give to the cynics, Alex?
Well, sounds like they should use ChatGPT to go write a sci-fi book. No, but more seriously, I think there's so many possible futures. If they're genuinely worried about it, then I encourage them to join the industry and actually take part in helping to make sure we don't build that future. If they're worried about it from an armchair observer's perspective, then I think it's important that we talk about these issues, that we debate them, but also understand the realities of where we are at today. And I'm optimistic that the trajectory we're on today, and what we as an industry and Wayve and other actors are building, is certainly building a much more effective future, like the vision we've been describing in this conversation. Take part, or make sure you're grounded and engage in constructive conversation.
Yeah, fantastic advice. So I know we're coming towards the end now, Alex, and we've covered so much ground here that I could literally talk to you all day. I'm sure Kerensa feels the same, because I totally geek out on this stuff. And I know you're a young man, okay, but I'm just thinking, looking back on your career to date, if you could have a conversation with, let's say, 21-year-old Alex, what would you tell that guy? What advice would you give that guy?
Oh gosh. Meeting 21-year-old Alex would be crazy days. And I also am aware that I'm very privileged to be able to say this, but really prioritizing learning and experiences over, say, money or material things is something that I think pays absolute dividends in your life.
Yeah.
So that's been really, really big for me, as well as just to instill a sense of confidence in myself as everyone goes through that journey of finding their own identity and being proud to be contrarian and chase your dreams. That's what comes to mind.
I love that. I'm a contrarian at heart as well. I question everything to my wife's annoyance, but yeah, I love that. Brilliant.
I was just wondering what he would have told the kind of 11-year-old version of himself, the one that was playing with video, inventing video games.
To my 11-year-old self, I'd really encourage myself to chase my dreams, and it comes back to that confidence point first. It's be okay with failure, to be okay with making mistakes, and to just try and learn while you have that privilege, and to really saving their time, because, well, I'm coming back to the same statement. It's all about time and experiences.
Sure. Probably more emphasis on gaming when you were 11, though, yeah? Do more gaming, yeah?
I wish I had time for that these days.
Yeah. You're an AI expert, obviously. What AI tools, browser extensions, what tools have you used recently which you benefited from a productivity standpoint? And what other productivity advice can you give the listeners?
Oh, look, as I said before, I think being curious and an early adopter in this technology will be a competitive advantage as these systems just get better and better over time. I've been a big advocate for our team to adopt this internally at Wayve, whether it's GitHub's Copilot that accelerates your ability to write software, whether it's ChatGPT to help provide advice or restructure writing, or Notion's AI system to help with writing our internal documentation. These are some of the tools we've evolved. I've even been using Stable Diffusion to generate graphics for some of the presentations I give. I think that learning how to write prompts and engage these systems, it takes a bit of time and investment to actually make it a value add and not just a gimmick. But prompts into ChatGPT like, you are a chief of staff at a technology company, answer concisely. Please help me by summarizing these statements and then putting text in, or helping to reformat things, or even asking for advice. It can be a remarkable coach. Having said that, going back to the awareness of its limitations, there is a lot of hallucination and bias still present in these systems. And so I'm not yet at the point where I let them run autonomously on my communications, but as a writing guide and aid, I found them to be remarkably effective.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, the act as a prompt was a game changer for me anyway, in terms of ChatGPT. It's a brilliant prompt. But can you tell us a bit about Alex outside of work, what you do to chill out, and what's next for Wayve? What exciting stuff you got coming up?
Gosh, I mean, Wayve is such a hobby for me. It's consuming in my life, and I love it. It's nothing else I'd rather spend time on doing than the work and the people that I feel so privileged to work with. For me, outside work, I love adventure, I love sport, I love friends and family, I love reading and learning. I think these are some of the things that really are real core values of my life. To the second part of the question, what's next for Wayve? Well, we're excited to take this thing to scale. As I said, we've got a proof of concept system that shows that a next generation approach with end-to-end deep learning is possible to solve the self-driving problem. We want to scale this. We have all the ingredients we need from the investment, the operations, the data, the compute, partners, and we just need to build this to bigger and better, and ultimately get this to a point where society can trust it and we can deploy it in a safe and accessible way to power the future of urban mobility. So watch this space. I think embodied AI and robotics is about to go through that inflection point that we've seen in internet text and video. Robotics is robotic. The age of autonomy is on its way.
And what an appropriate note to end on, eh? That was a fantastic line at the end there, Alex. Thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed this one.
It's been fantastic. And congratulations, Alex, on all you've achieved, and good luck for the future.
Thank you, Kerensa. Thank you, Gareth.
I mean, I think, definitely a superstar of British business within the tech AI space, at least. And I think we're going to hear a lot more about Wayve. And also autonomous driving systems and driverless cars are just going to be everywhere soon. It's inevitable, isn't it? So privileged to get Alex on and talk about some of the amazing topics and things we discussed. So he said what scares him most about AI. I think it was a very different answer to this question. I did ask a couple of the guests this as well, and they didn't really bring this up. And I was quite surprised by this, especially coming from him. He basically said that he thinks AI has the propensity to maybe become too complicated for humans to actually sort of build on, basically. I suspect what he's getting at is that we may lose control a little bit, possibly. And I think for him, who's obviously understands that the technical element of artificial intelligence, I think that is quite a profound statement. Did you have any thoughts on what he said, his answer to that question?
Yeah. It just struck me that he's someone who's thinking incredibly deeply about it. And because he is a data scientist himself and an engineer himself, he can sort of almost horizon scan and future gaze and think about what the potential impacts could be of the future. So I think we're in safe hands with somebody like him because he's worrying about it. It's the same. I mean, here at BT, we've got the most incredible data science lead in Zoe Webster, and she spends a lot of her time thinking about the risks and the challenges. And I think it's sensible that the engineers are thinking all of this through, so that we can ensure that we safeguard the world for the safety of the human beings, the environment, and all of us. And I think it's the sensible thing to do, to be thinking all these things through.
Yeah, absolutely. You want your best people working on your most difficult problems, don't you? So was there anything else that sprung to mind, or anything else to add?
Well, only that you missed the big one there, Gareth. It's like, clearly Wayve is making waves.
As you quite possibly have heard me mentioning in the past, we record the mass majority of our episodes at an amazing studio facility here in Cardiff at Tramshed Tech. Tramshed Tech is a collaborative community of entrepreneurs and scaling businesses geared towards supporting growth in tech, digital and creative industries across an ever-increasing collection of locations and partner locations, UK-wide and internationally. It really is the perfect place for your business to start up, scale up, accelerate or innovate. Head over to tramshedtech.co.uk or just search Tramshed Tech on your favourite social media platform.